Hey God's Money people, Don White here. It's really a blast doing this. I hope you guys are enjoying it. It's a blast for me to do. It's a lot different than what I did on the radio, and we just go for it on this format. I try to keep them relatively short for you, and I hope you appreciate that. So I want to talk about something today that I think is near and dear to my heart. I read an article the other day, and dudes, I was just completely blown away with this article. America is the richest country in the world. Right now, the average salary of an American is something just a little bit south of $50,000 a year, about $1,000 a week. Yet, 75% of Americans do not have 1 week's pay in a bank account. I'm not talking about their little 401k accounts or that kind of stuff. I'm talking about money they can get their physical hands on right now. And the reason for that is because we live on about 102% of what we actually make. In this article, the guy talked about this. He said, now, I want you to think about this. This is crazy. The average person who makes $60,000 a year spends $49,000 on just basic necessities of life as defined by that person. If you're making $60,000 a year, your FICA tax alone is going to take up about close to $5,000. And your income tax is going to take up at least $5,000. And if you live in a state where there's a state income tax, and obviously it's even more than that. I mean, we're talking about essentially 100%, if not 102 or 103%, of a person's actual income being expended on things they consider necessary to live. We're talking about housing, health insurance, gasoline for their car, and insurance, and so on. And so what ends up happening is they do not have any money. 75% of Americans live essentially paycheck to paycheck. That to me is an absolute shame, if not travesty. You know, I've been blessed to be involved with Love Without Boundaries, which is our foundation, and we do work over in China, currently beginning to now start doing work in Uganda as well as Cambodia. Folks, those people got nothing. When I say they got nothing, I mean they got nothing. And yet, they're happy. Lives are still enriched, and when we do just a little bit for them, I mean just a little bit for them, give them a little bit of a like for example over in Uganda right now, we just gave these kids, we're in the process of building these kids a little school. The joy on these kids' faces when they went into that, right now it's really just walls and a floor. I haven't gotten the roof on yet or any of that. Just walking through this place that they know is going to be their school, these kids were like going crazy happy. I sit back and I look at the situation we find ourselves in today, where 75% of the people in America live paycheck to paycheck, and yet they're making more money in a week than some people in the world make in a year. And it's because, really, at the end of the day, we have mixed up what's really important. I want to give you some thoughts, because I really believe that if you can begin to start thinking like this, you can live well above your means, even if your means are, in fact, a lot smaller than you think they are. The most important thing that you can do as a person is learn that you are not the most important thing in the world. That other people are a lot more important than you are. You know, I work with an awful lot of people who are in that 25%, you know, the people that actually have a pretty significant amount of wealth. Some of my clients have millions of dollars that have been set aside and so forth. There's some things that I've noticed about those folks that are different. People that are in the 25%, not the 75%. And in fact, if you go beyond that, the people that are 25% of the 25%, the top 5%. And the first thing they do, probably more than any other thing, they put themselves second. They decide that they're going to set aside money for other people first. People that do well have learned that giving is such an important part of their lives that they will not forsake it. They want to give. They find reasons to give. When they hear about someone in need, they want to find out, hey, how can I help that person? But you know, you really can't be a giver if you are not first a saver. Now that may sound paradoxical in some ways, but it really is true. A person cannot give if they haven't set aside money to be able to give. Unless you just are arbitrarily finding things to give to, which I guess is possible, you're not probably going to give much. So what I always tell people is, you need to pay yourself first, because if you pay yourself first, put money aside specifically so that you can give money away, so that you can have money for future endeavors and so forth, you're going to be in a much better position than the person that's living literally paycheck to paycheck. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to say, I am not going to live paycheck to paycheck. First and foremost, you have to tax yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? The first thing that happens when they when the employer writes or begins to write your paycheck, first thing he's going to do is going to take out for your FICA taxes, he's going to take out for your income taxes. It comes out automatically. So if you make $1,000, you don't get $1,000 net, right? And what's interesting to me is how many people don't ever really think about this. Why don't we make savings a tax? Why don't we take and say, okay, I'm going to put away a certain amount of money out of my paycheck before I even touch it. I'm going to have that money taken out of my account. It's going to be a tax, just like my income tax. Now, what's funny about this is that if you get a paycheck of $900 this week, or you get a paycheck of $860, I think you're going to probably figure out how to live within both. And I want you to begin with a tax bracket of about 10%. Now, when you begin to tax yourself, there are certain things that happen. Number one, you learn the secret of taking risk. To be able to tax yourself, you've got to do some risky things occasionally. You've got to be able to work more. Work as many hours as you possibly can. If I were to give advice to young people today, I would say there's 3 things that you need to really start thinking about. Number 1, stop overspending. Number 2, save at least 10% of the money that you make. Do you realize that if you start putting $1,000 a month away at age 20, do it until you're 32. Do it for 12 years. And then the other guy starts at 32, starts putting $1,000 away, and he does it all the way until he's 67. He does it for 35 years. I do it for 10 years. Who's got more? 12 years. Who has more money? The guy that put it in for 12 years or the guy that put it in for 35 years? 3 times as much money in than the other guy's got to have more money, right? Do the math. If you use the exact same interest rate, that guy who put it in first will always be ahead of the game. The higher the interest rate, the more ahead of the game. I can't get over how many people are just apathetic about learning about money. And when people become economically literate, when they become understanding or they really get to understand what it means to earn money and then save it and keep it and continue to be able to do certain things, their lives begin to change. They realize they don't need to live on the edge of every single paycheck, on the edge of every commission if they're on commissions, or the edge of every hourly wage if they're on hourly wage. I'm earning $25,000 a year right now. Man, if I could just earn 30, then you earn 30. Oh man, if I could just earn 40, then you earn 40. And if you're always living on the edge of your next paycheck, you're never going to experience what I'm about to tell you about, which is financial peace. I had a guy tell me one time about in my business, he said, if you really want to have good clients, Don, you've got to find a really good client and hook onto that wagon, because you know what? People that are very successful tend to hang out with people that are very successful. He said to me this, he said, Don, he says, you know, life is like a wagon train. And in a wagon train, there's a cart that has all the gold on it. And there's another cart that has all the manure on it. If you follow behind those 2 carts, remember, a little bit falls off of both carts. Hang out with people that are financially literate. Hang out with people that are doing well, and you'll begin to start doing well. It's just a real interesting dynamic. I don't understand it, by the way, and to me that is a paradox. I want to be financially independent. I'm sure you do too. Don't be part of the 75%. Be part of the 25. Hey, I'm Don White. This is God's Money. And remember, it's not your money, it's God's money.